All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's August 25th, 2021. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. Our dogs will be participating as well in the background. Sorry about that. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator. That means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. So if you enjoy our sessions and want to catch up on some of our past episodes, head over to our YouTube channel and check those out. So with that said, we're going to kick this off with some announcements and some cool developments coming out of Cloud Posse over the past couple of weeks here. So I'm going to escape out of here. So the first one is a change to our Null Label. So Null Label is like the foundation of like every module that we have at Cloud Posse. Null Label is why all of our modules work well together. Null Label ensures that we don't have duplicate resource names and that our resource names don't collide. And that when you log into like your cloud provider, maybe it's AWS, maybe it's Google, and you look at your resources, they're all beautifully, consistently named with proper tags everywhere, consistent label formats. It's not prod, then something, and then something, then prod, then something. And you know, I hate that when I see that when I log into an organization and see how messy it is. So the change we recently did was in response to some more common use cases that we've been dealing with as a result of our consulting. It's very common amongst enterprisey, high ticket SaaS companies that you might have dedicated AWS accounts or dedicated resources provisioned for a tenant. And it was cumbersome naming things consistently in this way. And historically, what we did was we just prefixed or affixed the name field with the name of the tenant. So for example, if you had a tenant called Acme, they just paid $1 million for you to host their WordPress site, and you're gonna deploy that to the infrastructure. You want to have that in their own AWS account with a prefix of Acme. Well, we decided that this was important enough that we are going to modify our Null Label module. And we try and keep these changes infrequent because this module is used by 180 or something Terraform modules in our ecosystem. So when we change it, it triggers a pull request to 180 repos. And we don't like reviewing that many pull requests, but we do it every time from time to time. So as part of this, we bundled a couple other changes. So we added the ability to specify the tenant. We added the ability to explicitly specify which labels as tags you want. And this is to mitigate some new functionality in Terraform where you can set the default tags at the AWS provider level. But if you're also setting those tags with Null Label or in your Terraform modules, what happens is you get perpetual drift, perpetual change, like it's always wanting to plan. So now if you set labels as tags, you can specify which labels specifically should be passed automatically by Null Label as tags so that you don't get those conflicts if you're also using the functionality of the Terraform provider. And then lastly, this is the one that I'm most excited about. This is descriptors. So we are not advertising it too well yet in our documentation here because this functionality is so new. We didn't want everybody to just jump on it right away in case there's some warts or things we got to fix. So we'll be updating or extending the documentation on Null Label to do this. But if you look at our tests, we've extended this with examples. So I'm going to pull this up here, descriptors. All right, so here's an example of this in action. So the Null Label module is designed to produce consistent set of labels for your modules. And sometimes you might need multiple labels generated by the same, for different use cases based on your context. So you might need a label that describes your account names, and that might strip out some fields. You might need a label for a description of a security group. You might need a label for IAM roles in a certain format. Well, what we've added is this ability to specify any number of descriptor formats that get output as part of this label. So in this case, in our automated tests here for Null Label, we have an example here. So we're specifying descriptor formats. This is the name of the descriptor. So this is our stack descriptor. Arbitrary. This means something to us as Cloud Possians, but this is arbitrary. It could be whatever you want. These keys could be. And then we're specifying what labels should be used to generate the actual output label. And then we're specifying the standard format for that label. So in this case, we want an output called stack, which combines tenant, environment, and stage in this order, in this way. But we want another output that represents the AWS account name, for example, to be a combination of just the stage and the tenant separated by a hyphen. And then we can access those descriptors this way. So just you access the module. In this case, we happen to call the module invocation descriptors, and that's why it says descriptors. But usually in your infrastructure, in your Terraform invocations, it would look something different. Like you'd have something like module.this.descriptors or module. Security group.descriptors or things like that. So I'm going to pause there. Jeremy, do we have you on the call?
I am here.
Cool. So where would you pick up from where I left off? Jeremy is the engineer on the team that worked on this implementation. He can probably shed some light more to his thinking on why we implemented it the way we implemented it and how it is and where we're using it.
Not much to add. You did a great job covering what we're doing there. The format of the format string is the same format that you would give to the format function in Terraform, which is the same string, more or less, that you would give to the Go format function. And we did it that way so that you can, it's, to keep a common format that if you needed to, for example, you could parse that descriptor string yourself, a descriptor format string yourself, and substitute. I mean, you might want to substitute different variables in there other than the labels that we have.
And one thing to point out is that they don't even need to be labels, like in that label format or descriptor format. They could be constants that you could use.
Well, the constants would have to be in the format string.
Yeah, in the format string, exactly. Yeah.
The labels, we didn't interpolate the delimiter, and delimiter is not a label, so you couldn't if you wanted to, unfortunately. But you can't. You put the delimiters in the format string so that you could use different delimiters if you wanted to. You could use an underscore where you're using dashes everywhere else. It wouldn't be unreasonable for your account name to include an underscore rather than a dash, where everything else is including dashes.
Yeah.
So, it's there to give you flexibility in a format you can use, yeah, there's that. The issue about the labels as tags is actually worse than a perpetual diff at the current release of the AWS provider. If you assign a tag that conflicts, that has the same key as a default tag. If you assign that tag in a resource, it will actually error out that you're attempting to overwrite a tag.
Oh, it actually errors. It doesn't
yeah.
just, I thought it just caused perpetual drift. Okay.
Yeah, so to fix that problem, they made it error.
Oh, all right.
So
Okay.
the way it works is if you don't specify anything, then all of the tags, whether they're in the ID or not, all of the labels that are not null are exported as tag, null or empty. All the labels that are not empty are exported as tags, except for name is treated specially. You always have to caveat that the name label, the name key, the tag with the name is reserved by AWS for display purposes. So we don't export the name label with the name tag. The name tag gets the full ID value, and the name label is not exported as a tag. Yeah. But otherwise, they're all exported. And the same thing happens with when you set labels as tags. Only the labels that you list will be exported. Name will still be set as ID if you export name. And unlike all of the other elements in Null Label, the labels as tags will not be overwritten or changed by later modules. Whatever it's set in the initial module will persist. This is to prevent. Well, this is because you're going to create this limit, and we don't want anybody changing it on you.
So I'd like to also present one way, just emphasize one way that this is so powerful is that, we have this huge module ecosystem, and the modules use each other, and yet different companies have different conventions, or maybe the way you're using it is slightly different. And in 99% of Terraform modules out there, if you don't like their convention, you have to fork it, change it, and now you're on the hook for maintaining it. What's so powerful about this, and the way we are using it with our customers, is we can set the conventions in one place, and then everything that we deploy follows those conventions now for every module there, because they just inherit those settings. So I think it's really cool, really cool. Any questions on this before we move on to the next announcement? All right. Next.
One other thing I should point out, I guess, we had by default included all of the labels in the ID, and considered extending the default to include tenant going forward, but found some use cases where that was going to break some things or create unexpected behavior. So we're not including tenant by default in the ID. If you want to use tenant and have it in the ID, you have to set label order to get it included.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that we didn't add it as a default. Okay. Yeah. So and that's another thing to be advised. Like, of course, this makes it very easy to have a consistent format of your resources in AWS or GKE or wherever you use it. But it doesn't solve the problem that when you change your format, usually Terraform or the cloud provider requires you to destroy the resources and reprovision them. So it doesn't work miracles. It's just a way to name things consistently. All right. So the next thing we did is,
sorry, Eric.
Yep, go on, Anton.
Yeah, hello everyone. Well, I have one question about this null label thing. Can you show the code? I mean, this one. So where you specify format, you specify %v dash something. Yeah. Have you considered possibility to use other function instead of just %v? For example, I have to make sure that stack or account name or something is never longer than 10 characters. So yeah. this means that if user, I remember this situation with Elastic Cache cluster name, which is I think very restrictive. So it has to be not more than 62 characters, and
Yeah.
it cannot contain multiple
Yeah.
dashes in between, and many other exceptions which are rather tricky to implement if you want to tell user that, hey, now just specify name. User will be creative.
We have the full null label module handles those kind of conditions, and the descriptor formats is definitely going to remain limited to what can be handled in a single format string. We're not going to re-implement null label in the descriptor formats.
I mean, so my spin on this is slightly different than Jeremy. We're not going to implement that right now, but you can see our descriptor formats is a map of settings, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't abstract away like how we do casing, how we do like a lot of the functionality. So we could add ID length limit here per descriptor format and use our standard truncation strategy for the limits. But yeah, we have not implemented that for the descriptors now, to answer your question.
So
and
you are
as a practical
really-
matter, in order to implement it, what we would end up doing is creating a new null label module anyway. So
It would be a submodule of null label that we could invoke for each descriptor, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's unlikely that we'll want to go that way, just as a practical matter. But what
I wouldn't rule it out, but
I wouldn't rule it out either.
Honestly, I thought we should maybe start considering that even at this stage, just so, because there's a lot of complexity in this module. It's very hard to do what this null label module does. And it might help us from a maintenance standpoint, decompose it into some smaller purpose-built submodules that are individually tested.
It would, yeah, it's architecturally and for efficiency in the current structure, it would be better for users to generate another null label module rather than try to re-implement all of these features in the descriptor formats. And if it turns out that there's a lot of demand for that, we will want to re-architect the implementation of null label.
Yeah.
Efficient.
Yeah. I think that's accurate.
I see. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's see. Next announcement is, this is an exciting announcement, I think, too. So on office hours, somebody brought up a new tool. It was totally not on my radar. I don't know who it was that suggested we look at it, but the tool was called Leapp.cloud. There's some debate if it's Leapp or Leapp, but we'll see. So Leapp is the missing tool for making authentication with AWS and Azure and GKE more consistent, whether you're using federated SAML, AWS SSO, IDP integrations, AWS access keys and IAM users, all that stuff. This tool normalizes that experience to some degree and works very well because it's an Electron app that bundles a browser so that you can log in natively to things like Google Workspaces or Okta or things like that. And to date, the console solution for this has been like SAML to AWS or a number of browser extensions, depending on if you're on Google Chrome or Firefox. There's a lot of hacks to it, but hack is the best explanation. Like they aren't a universal solution. And Leapp is a product that's open source and part of a collection of products by a company called Nuvolari. And they're in sweetops Slack and pretty active, and you can always reach out to them if you need some help. So we've been kicking the tires on this for the last couple months, evaluating that it would make sense for us to swap out. Before this, we used a hodgepodge of tools, whether it be aws-vault or SAML to AWS or like these browser extensions. So what we've done is we've gone ahead, we've updated our documentation. We've actually gone ahead and even deprecated our recommendation of using aws-vault because it really doesn't serve much purpose for us anymore, having Leapp in place of it. And using Leapp, this is basically how to get started if you want to use it together with Geodesic and the Cloud Posse toolchain and everything we do. I like to call it gateway documentation in the sense that we're painting the high level facts that you need to know to get started using Leapp. And then we point you directly to the Leapp documentation on like their install docs and how to do that. We're not trying to recreate that, but this is how to think about it, how to leverage it. And Jeremy worked on that. Jeremy, what else would you add?
It looks, if you just scan this document, it looks complicated and hard, but it's actually pretty easy. Part of the reason it looks complicated and hard is that it's covering 3 different use cases.
Yes.
And it's also written with the expectation that the reader doesn't know what they're doing and isn't really part of the AWS management.
Right.
If you are a DevOps person, you will have this information. You won't have to or know it and not really have to go hunting for it. But I was skeptical about using this tool when it first came out. It was missing some features. I complained about it. They added the features. I started using it, and I haven't switched back. I think it's great. It's they're continuing to improve it. It still has some pre-release kind of bugs that, but nothing that really affects its utility.
It's pretty hard also, I just want to say, to get Jeremy to like a tool like this. So this is a massive vote of confidence for him to let go of some of the other techniques that we were using. So
let's went to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's surprising. It handles the security aspects well. It only creates short-lived credentials. It runs a server that automatically updates them as needed. It doesn't update them if you don't need them. It's really well designed from the back-end perspective. The UI continues to need some work.
I want to highlight that thing that you just mentioned, which is that it. So when you're using AWS single sign-on, you're assuming short-lived credentials that expire after 1 hour. I believe the maximum actually on chained roles is 1 hour, right, Jeremy?
Chain roles, your initial session can be up to 12 hours.
Exactly. So, but if you're using this together with chain roles, it'll keep refreshing those, right?
Yes.
And that's priceless because nothing is more annoying than working with infrastructure and having to reassume the role halfway through something every 1 hour. And that 1 hour is a hard-coded, like you cannot override that setting. That is a maximum in AWS, for example.
Well, but what if you actually require MFA? Then you still need to type your MFA every hour.
No, if the chained role requires MFA, then yes. But usually the chained role does not. Usually, your initial role would require MFA. You need MFA to become you, but the service account that you're assuming a role for usually does not have MFA. It only requires that you initially, that your initial session had MFA credentials to assume that role. That's the way you should be setting it up anyway. In order to assume this role, the person assuming this role had to have had MFA active. Not that this role itself needs a separate MFA code. And if you set up your roles that way, then your initial session, which can be up to 12 hours long, is one you have to add the MFA code to. And yes, you have to do that every 12 hours.
Yeah, once per workday, right? And I think that's reasonable.
Well, if you work more than 12 hours, then
I knew you were going to say that.
Twice per workday.
Yeah, exactly. So in our industry, it's twice per day, unfortunately.
Once per reasonable workday. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but usually when I'm logged out from AWS console, then it's time for me to go offline. I almost never log in, and that's just.
Yeah, exactly. So this becomes a liability, like for family life and work-life balance, basically.
Exactly.
That we now need to like have blackout hours on our login app to force us to take breaks.
Yeah, another nice thing about this tool is that it lets you log out, sort of. You can log out of an AWS session and it will delete the temporary credentials.
That's nice.
That's also nice.
And it uses your keychain on OS X or Windows, depending on which way it's deployed. Cool. Anybody else using Leapp, or anybody else have any questions on this?
I'm not using it, but I thank you for sharing this. I'm currently trying to solve this problem at my organization right now. I just started a new job, and it's like I was looking at SAML to AWS or whatever. We use Keycloak.
Yeah.
I'm totally gonna take a look at this.
One of the things we've had, like with SAML to AWS, which has been the biggest problem, is if you use it with Google Workspaces, it's literally scraping Google's pages and extracting the fields. And then Google thinks you're a bot and then blocks you. And then you have to play this whole rigmarole or this dance, and you might be locked out of AWS for a few hours before it starts letting you in again.
Yeah, it's hack at best.
Hack at best. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why this tool has taken the better approach of being an Electron app, so it actually is a web browser, and it just lets you use the regular web browser workflow. And in fact, they're going to, they had a feature they took out, they're going to put back where you can use your real web browser. You can launch in a tab in your default web browser.
Oh, that's cool.
To take you through. And it also does nice things like it saves cookies and whatnot. So if you're using Google Workspaces, we only have to log into like once a month to refresh the Google Workspace credentials. And so if you're using Google Workspaces for your authentication, then you really don't need to keep even logging in with Leapp or Leapp.
Yeah. Cool. And Jeremy, I know you got to drop now, but one thing I just did want to announce while we're here, if you have time, we are actively working on finally publishing what we've been developing over the last few years internally as our kind of cold start documentation on how to get set up with our configurations. And this documentation will be coming out, I'm hoping, in the next week or two. We just got to open the pull request, but we've been refining it as we've been growing as a company. It's become unmanageable to copy this everywhere. So we're upstreaming this to our public documentation. So there will, for the brave, you will be able to implement the full Cloud Posse reference architecture with this cold start. This takes you through the process of setting up your new AWS account organization, member accounts, using our tool chain and our components and all of that stuff. So this is going to be big.
Yeah, it's difficult for us to thoroughly test it because accounts are extremely difficult to delete. So that's why it's taking us so long to put out, is we have to wait for a new client in order to test the documentation. But we have a new client. We're testing it right now. Found yet another little missing piece just yesterday or the day before. It's going to be good.
We've polished this off at least 6-7 times this year through new engagements. So it's coming together. It's a continual work of art, you could say. And the last thing is we have revisited, reevaluated kind of the feasibility of porting Geodesic for support for M1. And while Geodesic itself is easy to port to M1, so the new Mac chips, it's the tools that we distribute that won't be available. So the experience is pretty shoddy. So I don't know, maybe Jeremy, we can come up with a compromise where, hey, there's the image, you just can't install any packages that we provide. But one of the biggest things, one of the values of using the Cloud Posse ecosystem is that we have our own distribution of Linux tools that are distributed as Alpine packages, as Debian packages, as RPM packages, and it's the tools that we use in our trade. So rather than try and dig up the latest versions of these, our packages are updated every single day on a cron schedule, so you can always get the latest version of these updated nightly. So the problem is that vendors who distribute their packages don't create M1 variants for everything. And our distribution model for Cloud Posse packages is unique in that we aren't rebuilding these vendor packages for every architecture. We're just downloading the artifacts that the vendors already make publicly available, and we redistribute them through standardized Linux packages. So since we don't know what the coverage is on that for the AMD stuff, we have added a disclaimer now to Geodesic so that it's clear for people getting started what those warts are here and why we're not supporting it. Also, if you run Geodesic now, we were able to find out a way through introspection within the Docker container if you're on M1. So there's a few telltale signatures that you can check and then notify the user that, hey, this is probably not going to work for you.
There is work underway on our packages repo to add support for ARM64 binaries. No ETA on that. Don't hold your breath. But
it's a contributor working on it, right?
Yeah, we have a contributor working on that, and if volunteer work, so it may take a while, but once we have the ability to publish the ARM packages, then we can start cataloging how many packages actually have ARM distributions. Once we have a critical mass of ARM distributions, then we will officially support Geodesic on M1.
And yeah, and just to point out, like, it's not that we depend on all of these, and some of them have been deprecated, like AWS Okta, and we recently talked about not really recommending Vault anymore. But yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. Everything from JQ, Terraform, kubectl. So yeah. Any questions on M1 support and Geodesic? All right, well, let's move on then. I think that's the end of my announcements. Let's move over to Q&A. Thanks, Jeremy, for your time. I understand you got to drop, so we'll see you next week.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's no Q&A on the stuff we've discussed so far. If there's no questions, then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys later.
Yeah, see you, dude. So I went back through the office hours channel, kind of looked through what some of the questions were that we missed, because like last week we had a special guest speaker. So one of the questions was from Tony Bauer, and he asked, are the Cloud Posse modules tested using Terraform Cloud in addition to other standard setups? So so here's my nuanced answer to that. We are not specifically testing our modules for Terraform Cloud. However, one of our best practices is to categorically, almost entirely, not use local exec. And that means that our modules should work pretty much everywhere. Now, even if our modules use local exec, they will work on Terraform Cloud. Just there's some legwork you got to do, whether you're using Terraform Cloud hosted, and then you got to package up those binaries as part of your source control, I believe, or if you're doing self-hosted Terraform Cloud runners, then you can just bake those into your AMI or the Docker image that you're using for Terraform Cloud runners. So off the top of my head, a couple of the examples of modules like that would be anything that works with lambdas. Lambdas in Terraform is a mess and requires local exec stuff. Anything that tries to do like ECS task runs, which I don't think we have any modules publicly that do that. those use local exec. We have something that we have a module called Terraform external artifact. And our external artifact module is one that we use to pull artifacts for Terraform, for Lambdas. This one here relies on curl, but I believe curl actually ships with the Terraform Cloud. So I think that this one might work out of the box. So that's the long and short of it. If you're on the call, happy to answer any more questions on that, Tony. All right. Next question was, are you guys still using your own Atlantis fork? And this was a question asked by Igor, and it was answered in the thread, but I just wanted to, public service announcement. So, we were very early adopters of Atlantis and pretty gung-ho with Atlantis, but we ended up forking it because of some disagreements, totally civil, above board disagreements, but disagreements about features in Atlantis. And one of the things we really wanted was support for restrictive GitHub teams on who could do a Terraform plan. Because as we talked about 2 weeks ago, if you can do a Terraform plan, you can exfiltrate anything you want out of this environment. And Atlantis out of the box allows anybody to do a plan, even if you can't apply those changes. So we opened pull requests for this. They were not accepted, and the go-to answer by Atlantis was like, "Hey, you can just have a shell script that looks at this environment variable." Okay, cool. No, thank you. So we maintained our own fork for about a year, but it was hard to keep it up to date. The ecosystem has evolved. And I love Atlantis. I think Atlantis is like training wheels for GitOps and Terraform. I think that if you haven't done it before, you haven't implemented it in your organization, you don't have a budget, you want to showcase the value of GitOps with Terraform, you should try Atlantis. Anton Babenko has a module for it that'll be more maintained than ours right now. So check that out. But
not really.
No?
I'm very much interested in knowing your experience, because I'm not very active user of Atlantis, and I know that your fork is very active, and I mean not very active, but I have heard a lot of good stuff about your fork that's based on features which you added 2 years ago. It is still very much needed.
They are very much needed, and it hurts. So Pepe on the team, Pepe brought this PR to life last September, I think. And we got like 50 or 60 or I don't know how many thumbs up on it. And it looked like this is finally happening. We have interest in critical mass, but it's hung up on there's insufficient tests, automated tests on this pull request. So 1 year later, it still hasn't been merged because of insufficient tests. And who knows? I don't know. Pepe is very optimistic it'll still be merged, but I'm losing hope. So here's the deal. Check out Atlantis, check out Scalar, Spacelift, Terraform Cloud, M0. There's tons of these alternatives out there. There's even open source ones that Anton had on his weekly newsletter, weekly.tf. They look kind of interesting, much more nascent, but who knows? I think there's going to be a lot more interest here as more companies use Terraform. So check it out. And yeah, so Cloud Posse, just to promote, what we're using mostly is our module here, very active development, constantly receiving new features and updates, is our Terraform Spacelift Cloud infrastructure automation module. I'll warn you, this is very opinionated. This is like the secret sauce of Cloud Posse and how we do infrastructure. So if you're doing infrastructure some other way, probably your mileage will vary. But if you're starting fresh and you're looking for guidance on how to get started with this stuff, and you want to, pull the trigger on something like a Spacelift or Terraform Cloud, this would be the way to go. All right, next question was asked by Sheldon. Sheldon, are you on the call today? You're pretty regular. I don't see you, but I'll answer this pretty quickly. So here's my 2 cents. So Sheldon was asking in office hours if anyone has used both, CDK, which is Amazon's Cloud Developer Kit for Terraform or Pulumi, and he'd be interested in their impressions on using that. And he has a team of Go developers, so using HCL is actually harder for him to get this adopted. So, I haven't, our audience is very skewed, obviously, to Terraform users, and this question about using CDK or Pulumi has come up several times. And full disclosure, Cloud Posse, we do mostly Terraform. I just want to give you some ammunition or some thoughts on how to think about this and why, I think there are arguments you can say that this is even in the favor of your Go developers, because hey, dude, Terraform is in Go, providers are in Go. And we have a lot of Go developers now on the team, and we're writing providers for Terraform. And what is nice about Terraform is it provides a very simple DSL actually for expressing your infrastructure. And if you need the complexity, if Terraform's not enough for you and you need to do some other things, or you need to integrate with your own company's APIs or things like that, you can write your own providers. And Cloud Posse has now started maintaining 2 of our very own providers for this reason, because we've hit some of the limitations in Terraform. So what's the right answer here? There's a lot of great things coming out of Pulumi. Do your research, check it out. There's a lot of stuff for CDK, but it's a nascent, CDK for TF is nascent. It's very rough around the edges, and you're doing code generation, and code generation just adds another layer of complexity to debug what's going on. And one of the reasons why people want to use a formal language like Java, Go, or TypeScript or whatever is access to better debugging tools. But if you're doing code generation, what is that really buying you? And you're not going to be able to use those debuggers to do this. And the examples you find in the ecosystem, and if you go to Stack Exchange, you want to try something, you're not going to find examples for all the stuff you want to do. So are you optimizing for the right thing? You're optimizing like on this purest argument that, we are a Go shop, we should write Go. We are a TypeScript shop, we should write TypeScript. And maybe let go of that. Don't try and fit a square peg through the round hole. Expand the horizons, see what's out there, give it a shot. Anything to add to my monologue?
Oh yeah, I'd like to add a couple small things. In general, I mean, you said pretty much everything what I completely agree, but I just want to emphasize even more that Terraform or CDK for Terraform is not going to make your life easier by any miracle. Even if you think that, oh, I know programming language, now things will be easier.
Now you have 2 problems.
Now you have problem that you still need to understand, like what is Terraform, HCL, plus study by heart all limitations of Terraform. And then also monitor CDK for Terraform repository and learn what kind of features were not implemented still inside of the CDK for Terraform.
Yeah.
Because if you find something very cool and shiny and you want to use it, I guarantee that this is not yet supported in CDK for Terraform because it's another product which depends on Terraform.
That's really, I think that's great advice.
Try to think about this as you add another tool, so you need to sacrifice something.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So CDK-TF, yeah, you're eliminating the risk of like, well, it's another syntax I need to learn. So HCL, dude, you will learn HCL in an afternoon. It is the easiest freaking syntax out there. What you won't learn in an afternoon is the hard learned experience, the trial by fire. And whether you use CDK or whether you use Terraform, you're still going to have to learn those the hard way.
Well, there is something, one of the reasons why I abandoned Pulumi right in the beginning, it was you, because I was trying to deploy a subnet, and I started dealing with the subnet splitting and stuff. And I was accustomed to your magic subnet solution that is basically splitting up out of the box. And that's why I didn't go through the, it was just a test, but nah.
One of the things people like about Pulumi is it's incredibly dry to express things and do some simple things that way. And I get it. But I feel like what we've been able to accomplish at Cloud Posse for our customers is Well, I guess our modules aren't very dry. Like we offload the complexity there, but the user of it gets a very polished experience in the end. That's easy, very few inputs, very reusable, good building blocks.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of when people say that, oh, HCL is hard. Well, but then don't start writing modules first of all. Start consuming whatever other people created over some time, and I guarantee that 80% of your infrastructure is possible to create using open source stuff.
Totally.
So no need to go into lowest level on HCL and think about different types or different ternary operators differences and all this crazy stuff, which we have to kind of feel the pain and then
exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're probably doing something wrong. Well, okay, so two different ways. One is learn the basics, write the resources, learn why that sucks, and then start using some open source modules to make your job easier and appreciate it more. And then once you kind of get your head around that, start writing some of your own modules probably, or write modules that encapsulate other modules. So you're basically exposing the interfaces that you want your users to use without having to do all that heavy legwork, all that testing. All right, well, next question here. Let's see in the chat. I haven't been staying on top if we have any new questions here. Anton has the thing. Anton says, could we mention that this issue requires everyone's thumbs up so we can prioritize it? Let's see here. What is this issue? Let's promote it. Yeah, okay, so Anton wants to draw some eyeballs here. So native support for Terraform in the SAM CLI. I admit, so this is their serverless framework, right? For AWS by AWS?
Yeah, that's right. So they started thinking about this, and then they were a little bit skeptical, like, yeah, probably this is not so relevant. And well, then then Vlad, Vlad, he's
Vlad, totally.
Yeah, and then he
Vlad,
this issue, and we just started thinking about how the integration can happen. And I think it's really good approach to integrate these two tools because SAM potentially has much more flexibility in terms of how to build your artifact, while serverless TF and all Terraform code knows how to create infrastructure.
Oh, so leveraging SAM for the best parts and then Terraform for the rest, but making it easier to glue the pieces together, more for like application delivery than like your foundational infrastructure and things like that.
Yes. Yeah, because we already use Terraform for everything in the infrastructure, but obviously we don't want to call make build using local exec in Terraform.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
That is interesting. So Anton, what's your like? I mean, you're obviously a maintainer of with serverless.tf. Have you been working on that still, or have you been working more with SAM, or is this as a result of you trying to combine the two efforts?
Well, actually, I started looking at SAM before working on serverless TF because I obviously didn't want to make things like heavy lifting myself. And that time, SAM didn't have pretty much anything what I would use to build real artifact, like installing packages, ignoring some files, building native dependencies for different platforms, then package it as a Docker image. None of this was supported. So that's why we wrote our stuff in Python, and that's it. It works fine. We use it ourselves, as well as many thousands people are using it as well. But the point is that I don't want to maintain this Python script. And quite frankly, Terraform Cloud doesn't have Python installed.
Good Python.
So
yeah, it's a real pain if you have to, unless you do self-hosted agents, right? And you provide your own Docker image with the tool set. Yeah.
So that's why I'd like to combine these two tools and actually let AWS know or handle the whole packaging, and they can spin up the CloudFormation things as native part of the SAM process. I'm quite happy with that. But we also like to have some sort of integration where first it is SAM build, which is producing some zip archive, and then Terraform apply, which will utilize this artifact. But it has to be a little bit polished so that people don't have to integrate using their own make files by calling these two commands.
Yeah, I agree. More tightly integrated there. So
I think the point here is that AWS employees, or in this case, I think she works as a product manager. She wants to figure out whether there is even enough demand for this. I said, I mean, I put some figures there that total number of provisions of this module was 1.2 million during the year, as well as 115,000 clones during 14 days, plus a lot of people using it through TerraGrant, which is not reflected anywhere. So yeah, there are people, I can tell it.
Those are some pretty impressive stats there. It's just pretty insane when you look at the metrics for a lot of popular modules, just the number of clones, 30, 40,000 clones a day for some things out there. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys can upvote the main issue, it would be really good, and hopefully AWS prioritize it.
Yeah. I'm going to share this in office hours here. Go upvote it, everyone.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions? Turning this over to the floor here. Anton, any interesting announcements or things you've seen?
Well, I cannot talk about all exciting things which is happening because I will not have content for the next newsletter.
No, but you can rehash old things.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Well, not much is happening. I think a lot of people are still on vacation. So at least I have not seen a lot of very exciting blog posts lately. Just few. So that's it. But overall, we had pretty interesting discussion yesterday in Terraform AWS modules office hours, where we had a few difficulties with maintaining EKS module, which is number one by pretty much everything. It's crazy. There are so many people using it in different combinations, and it's a monster. It's by far the most complicated module, which I have not created.
So what was the resolution? What did you guys agree on?
Yeah, so the main thing which we were trying to figure out is how to make other people involved into the process, so that we will make or add labels into repositories, make it easier and make it more described. Like we want people to understand how they can help instead of just +1. We want people to do some tests, maybe think about different edge cases. Like my ultimate goal is to automate myself out of this, which hasn't happened for the last 4 years.
I know there was a call for help with automated tests for some of the modules, and you had some ideas you wanted to implement there. Any updates on that, or what you guys are doing with the? So by the way, just for everyone else, if you're not familiar, Anton Babenko is pretty prolific in the whole Terraform HashiCorp AWS community. He is one of the core maintainers and originator of the GitHub organization for Terraform AWS modules. He maintains some of the modules underneath that organization, and check out his podcast and his weekly newsletter and things like that. But so Anton, it was I forget how many months ago, but I remember seeing you posting for help there. Did you guys make any progress or figure out what you're doing for automated testing?
Well, we didn't do pretty much any progress on that side. I mean, I think all of us have pretty good understanding of how it should be working.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of other things, well,
Yeah.
outside of that. So that's why we didn't do anything visible. Like,
Yeah.
we have,
What's the first blocker that you have? Is it like AWS infrastructure for running tests, or is it time or bandwidth? What's the number one blocker?
Well, as you can see now, this repository has 103 open issues.
Yeah.
4 hours ago, there were 112 open issues.
Ah, Jesus.
So we were going through this and try to close a lot of things. A lot of this is just irrelevant or doesn't belong to the module. Or, I mean, we have to do something. And the main problem for us here is that we are not using this module ourselves. Like, I have not created this module. I don't use it for any of my customers. And the same with other people who have time to do the work.
Is Max,
so
I forget his name, Max or something, is he still principally involved?
Well, that's a problem that many people here.
Or Brandon, I guess is what I'm thinking of.
I mean, Brandon was the first one. Then it was Max, who's number 3 on this list.
Okay.
And for last year or even more, Tierna, who's on the very left, he was the main guy to do the work. So, but now he has less time and he wants to do something else. Obviously, we cannot push. So that's why we need to somehow collectively learn EKS very fast.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So that's a little bit challenging because, as I said, it's monster, and people who are there don't have enough experience, like practical things. Like, if you ask me anything about VPC, I can explain it to you. But if you ask me anything about EKS, I will have to Google it and think about it for like 10-15 minutes at least. So that's a lot of complexity. Even today, a small pull request, which normally would take me like 5 minutes, took me about 2 hours just because I was not sure where the thing will actually use. Like all these node groups, which are, well, very complicated. I don't even know how to explain. And I
understand.
Trying to click everywhere, try to see what is changing, what is related, what is dependency. So it's really challenging for me. But,
and so what are your sorry, I got DOS attacked. Every time somebody gives me a phone call, it steals my Bluetooth headset here. What are your thoughts, like longer term, like testing wise? Is it going to be TerraTest? Is it going to be AWS native testing? Is it, or it's not AWS, I mean, Terraform native testing? Is it going to be a combination of them? Is it going to be Test Kitchen? I think you guys started with some of that stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Test Kitchen was added, I think, in the very beginning, and we never ever have been actually using it for real. My personal preference is still for native Terraform. I'm not still not very much convinced that we have to use TerraTest, even after 3 years of seeing other people using it. I'm still not convinced that this is the right tool for that. I would rather use parts of native functionality plus parts of maybe Terraform Kitchen. But I really hoped, and that's actually surprising, we are almost a year ago, Martin Atkinson has created provider, and he was making it public. He was making it public and talking about that, hey, we are considering adding Terraform test. And I was overexcited that time. I gave a try. I did some things and tried to use it for real, provided feedback, and that's pretty much it. I mean, the tool itself is or has been developed to some point, and that's it.
I mean, it was an early release. It was to solicit feedback, I guess. But yeah, I think it's unfortunate that it hasn't taken more momentum within HashiCorp itself, because I mean, at this point, Terraform's a bona fide language. We need testing. We need better debugging tools. It goes without saying.
Well,
Well,
yeah, tooling for Terraform is definitely missing, and I'm really kind of disappointed, I would say, that we don't have native Terraform test functionality a little bit more polished, and then we can use it.
Totally
There's
agree.
not much left, even if I remember correctly, since announcement, or not announcement, but pre-announcement in October. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think they should put some. I think that I don't know what the next step is for them to gain more exposure, visibility for this, but it's important.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody's calling me left and right because we're over time. So thank you everyone so much for office hours here today. If you haven't yet already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/c/cloudposse. Subscribe. It helps us out a big deal. We just hit 500 subscribers, so I'm very happy for that. Thank you everyone for doing that. If you haven't yet subscribed to our office hours weekly invite, please join us at cloudposse.com/officehours, cloudposse.com/officehours. You'll get an invite to your calendar, so you'll remember to join us next week and every week from there on after. We do have a Slack community. Head over to slack.cloudposse.com. Join nearly 5,000 people who are really awesome and very helpful and friendly. Look to see you there. I look forward to seeing you there. Take care, everyone. See you all next week, same place, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Anton.